This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 103. Dan Taylor. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 103 of Experts on the Wire. On today's show is a fantastic guest by the name of Dan Taylor. I caught up with Dan at Tech SEO Boost in Boston last November. On the show, we talk about a lot of different topics, but some specifically that I think you're all going to love and be very interested in is one, the modern day technical SEO audit. Things that are good about it, things that are bad about it. We chat about that. We also talk about mistakes young SEOs make. I asked Dan about this, and his answer kind of surprised me when I asked him what some mistakes are that he sees young SEOs making. We also chatted a lot towards the end about JavaScript SEO and the challenges that this can bring. And this, in fact, is a tease of the next episode of Experts in the Wire that is sort of the big special episode that I've been working on after talking to a good dozen or so technical SEOs at Tech SEO Boost in Boston. So you're going to get a little tease in that. We're going to talk about all the different opinions that people have about JavaScript SEO. And his is one of many. So you're going to hear Dan's take on it. We chat about it. But in the big episode next time, you're going to hear a lot of different opinions about that. Towards the end, we're going to talk about something called Yandex Metrica. I'd never heard of this before, but it's very, very powerful. Okay, let's jump right into episode 103 of Experts on the Wire. So Dan, great to see you here at Tech SEO Boost in Boston. Appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. I wanted to just start with your background first. I was digging into your LinkedIn profile. I had trouble connecting the dots to where your first introduction to SEO was specifically. I saw you did marketing and business, but where was that first experience you had with SEO?
So really, my first kind of job out of university was working with a screen print ink manufacturer on an internship, and even though the job profile said marketing assistant, I effectively was thrown in at the deep end straight away, working with their web development agency on essentially helping them put a new website live, do content, help them with SEO, that sort of stuff. So it was kind of, it was a very traditional business, but all suit, tie. Yeah. And it was very much the sort of he's the young lad, he's done marketing at university, he owns a MacBook. He knows websites, so it was pretty much straight in at the deep end without floaties. So I kind of picked things up there, then developed that further when I moved on to working with higher industry, again in-house, and then I went into elder care in-house again as well. And I just worked with different external SEO agencies, managed them, picked up things from them, and just developed the skill set myself a little bit more. Then moved on to a boutique agency that specialised in SEO for the travel industry. Mm-hmm. That's probably my first pure play SEO role. But before then, I worked a lot with email, social, PPC. So I like to say I developed a little bit of a skill set in other areas and then just went into pure specialism.
And you have a technical background. I saw you won an award with OnCrawl, one of the top 20 technical SEOs. Where did you get your technical background for SEO? Is it self-taught, on the job? How'd that happen?
A lot of it, to be honest, has been quite self-taught. It's just been a case of, and I've got quite an inquisitive mindset. So it's been a case of, even like when I'm watching television or when I'm looking around a website, I can fall into a rabbit hole quite quickly. Mm-hmm. Because it's, why is that not working? Why is that working? And then I look into it, learn it, and then just think, that looks fun. Can I apply that somewhere? And then just try and work it that way. So yeah, it's kind of been self-taught, a lot of trial error on a lot of my own private sites and sandbox sites. And yeah, it's been quite fun.
For some in the beginning now, they feel like they're maybe not technical at all or a little bit, or they want to just expand their technical horizons. Do you have any go-to resources you recommend, like books or anything like that, that if somebody wants to become more technical in SEO?
I think with regards to sort of books and sort of the hard copy resources, for me, a lot of books are kind of out of date the minute they're automatically published. I mean, the only main SEO book I purchased sort of in that sort of 6-7 year ago phase was The Art of SEO, mm-hmm. which was edited by Rand Fishki and Eric Eng, and I think to this day there's still a lot of basics in there, but for me the resources are it's very much, it's how inquisitive a human is as a person. So if you go and read a blog post that explains the benefits of X over Y, I'd urge them to actively then seek out a counter argument and purposefully read, even if they disagree with views, purposely read them and then look for the application, and then just kind of understand that whilst there is the holy grail of best practice, the real world doesn't like perfect equilibriums.
Right.
So you have to learn how to apply things, and sometimes that does mean doing things which aren't strictly best practice. No, I'm not saying do black hat things, but it's about adapting other scenarios for the benefit in achieving the goals you're trying to achieve. So
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about Salt and what you do with Salt Agency.
So I've been with Salt just over 2.5 years now. I primarily work, so we don't really have a sort of a diverse split. So we don't just have account managers and we don't just have technical people. All account managers are technical and all technical people are account managers, because it removes layers and miscommunications and things like that.
How many people at the company?
There's 15 in
15.
total.
Do you think that would work with a bigger company, or would it hit a certain scale where that might not work?
With Salt, one of the things we mainly stand for is we like Martin and Reza, two of our co-founders, they all worked at the larger agencies. Martin's built search teams at larger agencies to offer a full service model. And so about 4 years ago when Salt was formed, very much the shift was happening and people wanting to take things in-house.
Yes.
The budgets weren't there, so it was a case of, how about we just do one thing really, really well,
right, and
provide that service. So we moved away from sort of cookie cutter model, and we basically just turn around and go, we know how to do X, Y, Z, we can apply this to this situation, and we work with many different people in different ways. So for some people we work pretty much as the go-to, assisting them with everything from migrations to full technical analysis. And some other businesses just kind of go, well, hey, we've got like 2 SEOs in-house, we'd love like to pay you some time a month on a retainer, can you kind of be like an outsourced third person for them to speak to?
Yes.
And we work sort of in a partnership way that way, because that's had some value, and they can come to us and go, stupid question, have you experienced this elsewhere? Because obviously they're in a silo in-house and it brings expertise wealth. So that's kind of what we do with Salt. Whether or not it would work on a larger scale, I'm not too sure, because I think you've got to manage the quality of output as well and consistency. But yeah, definitely, I think our aim is to do that. So my role mainly within that is I'm the account director, so I oversee a lot of strategy for accounts. I oversee a team of execs and consultants and work that way. But then I also just basically also do management on my own accounts and roll the sleeves up, get my hands dirty.
What do you do audits at Salt?
Yeah, we've actually just rewritten our technical auditing frameworks.
So I want to ask you about audits. What do you think about the modern day SEO audit? I saw a tweet the other day, I forget who it was from, and it said something like, it was from Kevin actually, who we were just chatting with. He talked about the traditional idea of an audit. You go away for a month, you do a big document, you throw it down on their desk later. That's a bit outdated in his tweet. So how do you approach audits? Because one thing I've done is taken more of the approach of being iterative, giving 5 recommendations at a time, let them do those and move on to the next thing. So how do you approach that?
So our approach is essentially, and we kind of go from the outside in. So our checklist is extremely exhaustive, it's extensive, and I agree, just going through a checklist and delivering a 250-page document to someone and going fix this, that's neither use nor ornament to anyone. So what we do is we go through that whole process, and that document exists. But then we break it down, and then we say, here's actually, so if anyone wants to see it, here's everything we've done, here's the check, here's your verification. Actually, here's a small document, here's all the issues we found. Based on your situation, here's how we would prioritize these issues. Based on our prior experience of implementing and fixing these issues, here's what our estimation of resource required would be, and effort. So we kind of do that almost like a risk reward situation with it, and then we just turn around and say, but also based on your situation, here's a timeline. I'd recommend here's 3-4 extremely high priority things we should definitely get scoped now. and if they take, say, 8 months, 6 months, but it's important we get rescoped first, these ones potentially can be done a lot quicker. So it's better working then with that company and that team. I mean, if they've got a development swim lane, winning, throw it all in there, let it go. But as I said in my talk today, one of the issues we face a lot is congested development queues.
Yes.
Because developers also have to do everything else for the company, not just what the SEO guy says. So
yes,
it's very much, delivering a massive checklist of things and saying run with it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But working with the business on prioritizing things to bring benefit definitely works a lot better.
That's great, and it's a great segue about service workers, which we're going to get to in a moment. But first, I saw that you also trained some of your junior team members. I'm wondering if you see common mistakes, misconceptions, wrong mindsets about SEO that more beginners or junior members continue to make over and over again, and what those might be.
I think when training people, I mean, we've got a couple of execs at the moment. Both are 18, not been to university, but in all honesty, they scare me in how much they've picked up in such a short amount of time.
Really?
Because for us, it's with SEO, okay, you need a certain level of mindset, but for me, it's attitude. And if you've got the right attitude to learn how to do certain things and learn how to understand the application of the knowledge. So like one of the more common mistakes I've seen, and to be honest, I see a lot of SEOs making this mistake anyway, regardless of seniority. It's sometimes the blind application of a recommendation as opposed to the modification of recommendations to fit the scenario.
Right.
So I'm just trying to think of an example. So with the service workers, for example, back to there. So with some companies, we can't touch the head of the case study I used, because if we moved the head, it would literally take down the site, because over 10-15 years, gaffer tape, matchsticks, band-aids had been applied to keep it up. So we had to find a workaround with that. Now,
do you literally mean the head in the HTML?
The head in HTML, yeah. So injecting JavaScript, right? Obviously we had to make sure it was renderable, but is that technically best practice? Technically not, because there's nothing out there that actually says that. Google doesn't officially say it supports a service worker injection. Right. Which after all the research we've shown, we hope it will do now, because it does.
Yeah.
That's not technically best practice, but it's still it's how you get from A to B in the most efficient and longevity way for the client. And for me, that's not, I actually wouldn't probably call that a mistake. It's just something that comes with experience and exposure. Yeah. So the more you expose someone who's learning to different scenarios, different environments, and throw them hideous curveballs, so they can, find the way out of it, and find the ingenious way of doing it. Because if you put two people in the same situation, they'll probably find different ways of getting out of it. Now, as long as it brings a result for the client, isn't black hat, isn't actually breaking any serious guidelines or guidelines full stop, or bring any kind of risk in the short, medium or long term, they're both best practice, but it's different routes. Yeah,
and I see that too. So you mentioned service workers. Let's chat about that. I want to start from the beginning. I literally didn't even know what a service worker was when I knew I was going to interview you. And so maybe some of the listeners, this is their first time hearing about service workers. It did sound very innovative and very forward-thinking, which I liked. And you mentioned one of the primary benefits being that you can skip the DevOps, right? You don't need the developers to implement certain things. So take us to the beginning. What is a service worker?
So a service worker, essentially, it's a programmable proxy. So essentially, it's a piece of JavaScript that sits in between the server and the DOM and the client-side web applications for the website itself. It can run asynchronously of both the server and the website. It uses something which is called a promise model. So it's there and it's promised it's going to be used. When the website's offline, it's not in use. It's basically a piece of asynchronous JavaScript which can modify things on the site from the way. It's basically an injection of JavaScript.
Where does it actually live? Because you have the client server with the files and the database and etc. And then you've got where does the actual JavaScript file
So the example we've used and we've developed is using Cloudflare workers. Cloudflare is a edge CDN, so it provides the edge cache. It's extremely accessible to use. I think it's about 40% of the internet currently uses Cloudflare, so that's why we went with that as well. Essentially, it lives on that lives on that edge cache.
I see.
So in my slides from today, I actually show the direct server response has no hreflang in it, whereas once you allow Cloudflare to inject and modify, it's there. And it lives there asynchronously, so in order to modify that, you just have to log into a Cloudflare account.
Okay.
And it's literally copy and pasting code.
And so, and I want to break this down a tiny bit more so I understand it, maybe the listeners as well. How does when the site loads, where and how does it pull from that Cloudflare? I'm a very beginner at this, so break that down a little bit more.
So an entire cache of websites is basically held within the CDN, and it's delivered through there. So even if in theory, if the server goes down, as long as the Cloudflare connection's up, it can deliver
content delivery network. Yeah.
It can deliver everything. So it basically lives in there as a modification of the content. So when Google requests for content, when a user requests for content, it also gets pushed with this. So that's why we could do things like hreflang, canonicals, JS overlays, even redirects. We can do them server side as well. So
yeah, you mentioned hreflang. That's what you talked about today as one use for service workers. Are there some other examples as well? You just mentioned, I think, 301s. Is this limitless? Could we, in theory, use this for anything that we can't get a developer resource to do? Or
yeah, I mean, in complete theory, and they exist, you can build an entire web application just using service workers. And have it load basically JavaScript files that way. So you can literally build anything you want, inject anything you want. You can do find replaces as well. So if you have a website and they push it live and the canonicals hard coded to example.com/home, and you're like, no, it needs to be just the root, and the devs are like, oh, it's going to be 7 months before we can fix that. And you slowly lose rankings of your homepage because you're duplicating everything. You can implement a service worker to rewrite the canonical to point it to the correct place, and it's fixed once it's deployed.
And are there any CMS or platform limitations? If you're on a Shopify or a WordPress, are you able to use this in any environment?
Yeah, essentially, as long as you can get Cloudflare enabled. Shopify uses its own CDN, so I'm pretty sure you probably might be able to input it as a secondary layer, as long as the Cloudflare doesn't actually try to utilize any of the functions. And it just has that proxy level. Same with things like if you're using anything like Akamai or Encapsula, as long as you're not using that for DDoS protection or the CDN elements again, you can slide it in as another data layer. With things like Shopify though, and even like Salesforce, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, formerly Demandware, because they're shared servers, it's very difficult to get server logs out of them. So another use for that is you can actually use the service worker to sit in the HTTP header, and it will collect logs, like a pseudo log file for you. So you can actually do a form of log file analysis. Because with it being a shared server, they won't give you the logs because it's multiple sites on one. So
wow, very cool. So you mentioned hreflang. That's what you talked about. Tell me about your tool, the hreflang checker. What does this tool do, and how do you feel it's adding sort of unique value to some of the other hreflang checker tools that are out there?
So with hreflang checker is essentially I use all the tools, but we kind of when we put that out there, kind of felt that it's great, it flags errors, but we want to try and progress it a little bit more. So ours kind of start to give recommendations and suggestions. It will flag return tags. We're also in the process at the moment of actually making the hreflang checker tool an international tool. So I think it'll be the first actual hreflang checker available in non-English.
Oh wow.
So it'll be an international hreflang checker like it should be.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's just another verification point and another tool in that respect, because it's great. There's X number of tools out there that do it, but there's a couple of tools out there, example, which do hreflang checking, which don't have accurate databases. So things like the Channel Islands were only added, I believe, in 2014 to the ISO list. Perfectly valid work. There's a couple of tools out there that flag them as errors because the database isn't up to date. So for me, it's just a case of moving things forward, creating better versions of everything constantly. And I'd love in 2-3 years someone to make one a lot better than ours, because that's what the industry needs.
Yes. So anybody out there listening wants to make one, now's your chance. So I want to jump to a few questions from Twitter, and then we'll go back to some other questions that I had. The first is from Drew. He wants to know, what's the most important technical SEO aspect to know? For people starting out in SEO, where should they start in regards to technical SEO? We kind of chatted about this. But this is an opportunity maybe to dive a little bit deeper. You did mention, what I was picking up from what you said was a lot of direct experience, right? Like actually doing it, learning for yourself. But if one were to try to start with a resource or reading something, one thing I often recommend is Google's Webmaster Guidelines. I still think it's a good, solid resource. Are there anything like that the user can, the listener can maybe take a few hours on a weekend and dive into, or a video, or?
I think really there's great publications out there. So Search Engine Land, Search Engine Journal. I mean, I write for the latter. A lot of the content, though, it's very much like how to do X with Y, whereas if you're very much just starting out, it is very much for Google Webmaster Guidelines. With specificity to technical SEO, I'd personally look into more information architecture structures and architecture itself.
That's a good point.
Because if you can learn that and learn the basics of that, so internal linking, web structures, how a website is actually put together, learn a little bit, you have to learn how to code, but learn the basics of what a network structure looks like behind a website as well. And you can understand that full process, then rather than looking at a website as just being a list of URLs, you can learn to look at it as an ecosystem and as a tree. And then how linking branches to branches can work. And similar to like what Kevin's talk was today about internal linking and understanding, and okay, it's great, but internal linking passes things like PageRank, but it's also crawl efficiency, it's user efficiency, and basically once you can understand the network structure, information architecture from the web architecture, and you overlay those three together, that's your website. But just learning those three layers first, then you can go off and do things like title tags and all the standard stuff. But that's the key fundamental for me with technical. I
want to call out what you said. I think that's the answer, which is you don't say I want to learn technical SEO. What you say is I want to learn web architecture or information architecture or a certain code language. That's what I think people should be doing. So go learn JavaScript if.
For me, once you understand those sort of things, everything else kind of almost works together and it kind of falls into place. Because for me, I kind of like still find it funny when you see like a firm pitch for SEO and they say, oh, we can help build these backlinks to here, and it's like, great, but I probably don't need the backlinks. What I probably need is someone to just come and readdress some internal linking structures and make better use of what we've already got. Or if you understand the entire web architecture, then you understand ontologies, and you understand your vectors, and you understand where things go. So you can understand that, I've got like 9 pages talking about the same thing. I can consolidate, or I can make a resource section. Once you understand that, everything else kind of, in my opinion, makes things life a little bit easier.
So I know Kevin talked about internal linking. You mentioned it just real quick. Do you have a tool or process that you like to identify internal linking opportunities?
To be honest, it's overlaying data again. So we use Screaming Frog, we use Sitebulb. I've used free trials with other things as well. And it's basically get as much crawl data as you can, use as many user agents as you can, then use things like Gephi. I use Glyphy as well to build my own tree diagrams, overlay them with crawl maps from Screaming Frog and Sitebulb. And once you've got all that data together, then it's almost like a game of chess, just moving things around and putting together a structure. Then you can go, well, in reality, this page over here might be a sync node, so a page without any reciprocal links going back to the other pages. So when Google sees that, it effectively has 2 choices. Either prevents crawl, or it makes a parallel jump to somewhere else. And that's where you lose PageRank equity, and that's where you lose crawl efficiency as well.
Next question from Twitter is 2-part. It's from Farabi, if I'm saying that name correctly. Would you please talk about SEO strategy for a user-generated content website? Maybe you've experienced this with travel SEO. And about AMP for video sharing services. Let's tackle the first one. What are your thoughts on UGC websites? Is there anything you've seen there work particularly well?
So I actually worked with one of the larger ones in the UK, sort of around about a year and a half ago, who had 2 million plus forum pages. So yeah, quite substantial. And essentially with that, it's obviously you've got moderation, and you've got to make sure, especially you're not just finding threads which people are spamming for outbound links and the forum link side of things. So there's sort of a bit of PageRank sculpting and retention in there. There's the potential for duplication issues, but for me it's about making a structure that works. So if you've got a UGC website and you've got specific topics, make sure that you can funnel it correctly.
Yes.
So when a user adds a comment, they pick, so even like basic things like a form, so rather than just having your simple name, email, website, comment, submit, you can put like a category field in there.
That's huge.
So if you do that and make select category, if they're on the wrong thread, you can help channel and actual funnel things better to where they are.
Yeah.
So say you were, I don't know, say you're an automotive UG site and you have brands, you have Toyota, Chevrolet, Infiniti, and someone wants to start talking about Chevrolet on the Infiniti thread, you can automatically go, well, you're tagging this brand of Chevrolet, and just have automated systems in there, kind of like how Reddit does, and say, hi, you're talking about this here, we've moved this thread here, and then you can help keep things in silo.
Yeah.
Well, if you build on that initial structure, it will make life easier rather than having to deal with scatter and move
Absolutely.
it all in.
So, I mean, and a lot of these principles apply to big content sites or e-commerce. I mean, we're just talking about categorization in a certain sense, but with UGC, it's finding these automated ways to do it a little bit more efficiently. Do you want to address they want to know about AMP for video sharing services? So if maybe we can pick apart what they might be asking, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, with that in mind, just have to ask them. I'll follow them up on Twitter just to see what they're actually delving into, because that's quite a piece of string.
Yeah, should I follow up now?
Yeah, definitely.
See if they write back in the next half an hour. Can you clarify what you mean by AMP for video services? Okay, Bill Scully, who's Water Guy on Twitter. Bill, I know from Semney here in New England. It's a big marketing and SEO search marketing organization. Semney, put them in the show notes. How do you QC a service worker? What's the worst that can happen technically when implementing one? That's a great question.
Yeah. So with the service worker code, essentially we deploy, we do initial testing. You always have to do testing around that. One thing we are actually looking to expand with, so in part of my talk today, we shared something called sloth.cloud, which is essentially, as we were building these service workers as solutions, it was extremely easy to turn them into generators. Mm-hmm. So we made the generators, and we've actually just put it out there for people to use, because it makes the technology more accessible, and then people can use it, and everyone wins.
Yeah.
One thing we are looking at actually doing at the moment is monitoring the service workers. So if you implement a load of 301s through a service worker itself, and then someone decides that they actually, one of the pages that's going to wants to change it, you can actually then get a ping back and say, hey, we've got a redirect chain now in here, and you can fix it. With regards to what can go wrong, it's very much a case of, as much as this is removing DevOps from the situation, in my opinion, you still need to keep DevOps in the conversation and keep them aware of what's happening, because this service and service workers in this use case are designed to be complementary. So keeping the developers in actual, basically the loop, keeping them abreast of what's happening, saying we're going to implement a service worker to do X, this is what the expected output will be, this is how it will change, this, that, the other. Then they can turn around and go, right, okay, well, can we double check it won't conflict with X, Y, Z? Yeah, definitely. And that's the only way to do it, because every platform's built slightly differently, every website's built differently. You might have a different cacophony of plugins, etc. running on there. So it's just about basically keeping the conversation open and the channels open. And at the end of the day, if you can do something yourself and you're not asking the developer to continue doing tedious jobs,
that helps them too.
It helps them, because it takes weight off their workload, and you're not chasing them via a project management system every day and saying, hey, where's my canonicals? You can achieve things, they can achieve things, it wins. With regards to other issues, so latency, the biggest thing we've seen it add is like 0.5 millisecond, because it's an asynchronous script. It's very, very lightweight. It doesn't add any weight to the DOM. In theory, there are no immediate drawbacks to it, but again, it is just a case of keeping the dev in mind and saying, we're going to implement X. Will it impact anything? And then when you push it live, have them check something and keep conversation flowing open, to be honest.
And just buy them donuts too, that helps, I find.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Donuts, coffee, beer, whatever you need to do. One more question from Twitter. Nikki Mosier says, I'd love to know if putting hours in a table has worked for other industries in GMB. You asked for drive-through hours. He said yes. It would be interesting to see if Google My Business would pull in a table for by appointment hours or something like that. What are your thoughts?
So this I think this is a blog article I wrote about a month ago, I believe, on my personal site. Essentially, I've got a couple of friends who have an agency down in Virginia. They basically just turned around and said, we've noticed that a couple of banks in Texas, the name has escaped me, I think it's like Velocity, is that a bank?
I have no idea.
Fair enough.
Texas is very far from here. I'm not sure.
It's not a brand I'm familiar, but essentially they've implemented 2 hour sets on their website, one for the ATM opening hours and one for the actual service bank opening hours. And within the Google My Business profile, obviously you only have one section for hours, but through the markup in the table and the actual markup on the page, it is picking up and showing drive-through hours as well as the complimentary hours.
Oh, wow.
So we've tested this at the moment with a coffee place down in Virginia where they have a drive-through. So we're testing it with that. We've basically looked at, well, they're using semantic HTML, they're using table, they're using structured based that. So we've replicated it to see if we can get it to trigger again. At the moment, we're not seeing it trigger, but essentially what I think it might be is a little bit of a trust element as well. So about, I want to say a year and a half ago, Rand did a Whiteboard Friday.
Yes.
On, it's the granola bar Whiteboard Friday, where he talks about when people search for granola bars, they expect to see tables of ingredients, words like healthy, allergens, things like that. So with a bank in these days, obviously you have a separate vestibule for ATMs. Google knows this, it'll learn this. So seeing different opening hours for different parts of the bank, it understands that in a better way, whereas not all coffee shops have a drive-through facility.
Right.
So it's, for me, I think that might be slightly at play, whereas it's kind of going with a mass rather than a minority, going, oh, why are you showing up now when no one else is? Not trusting this fully yet. Yeah. Whereas with the granola bar example Rand gave, if you have 9 websites talking about allergens, XYZ, and you don't, Google looks and goes, why aren't you disclosing allergens when everyone else is? Why aren't you talking about health benefits? Why aren't you talking about ingredients like they are? And it's that kind of, well, the users expect to see that, and it's got to make those decisions on ridiculous scales in his data processing. So I think the example that she gave originally was around like appointment hours. For me, I'd probably assume they'd just be your normal business hours you disclose in Google My Business, because for me that's how it would be. If you're open even if it's by appointment. If they change throughout the day or change on different days, just adjust those hours, but I'd go with that for the time being until the local business or organisation schema becomes intelligent enough to do their declarations and Google My Business becomes intelligent enough to do declarations. I think it is very much a case of, like I said, you expect banks to have an ATM vestibule.
Yes.
In the UK, it's completely different. All our ATMs are on the street. We have no protection.
Right.
So it's, for me, it's that trust element and what everyone else does versus what it already knows.
Yeah.
That might come in a week's time, it might come in a year's time, it might never come.
Sure.
But the important thing is just to test it and try.
Yeah, and we'll put that article in the show notes. That sounds really good. I do want to now jump to something John Mueller said. So we're here at Tech SEO Boost. I'm asking many of the speakers this one question. It's going to be put into a separate episode, but this is the entire unedited portion in your full interview. What I want to ask about in terms of this quote from John Mueller. So there were a few things that happened a few months ago. John answered somebody on Twitter saying that they cached JavaScript for a long time. I think this topic is great because we were talking about JavaScript and the accessibility of it. But then there was some conversation. Ian Lurie shared this article that Barry put on Search Engine Journal. But then John's reply to all of this was, JavaScript is not going to go away because SEOs don't like it. And I saw that, and there was a lot of engagement on it, but that quote kind of hit my brain, and it sort of shuffled things around. I didn't immediately know what he meant by that, or how to take that, or if I agreed or didn't agree, or if it even matters at all. So I'm curious, just first, when you hear that quote from John, what was your first reaction when you heard that?
So for me, I think it comes down to 2 things. So obviously, he's right, JavaScript isn't going to go away. It's a modern technology, it's been developed further. I mean, I can just about remember the days when people used to code in Cold Fusion and Flash, and praise the Lord, them days ago. But essentially for me, it's the issues are, and this is where working with developers comes closer again. When an SEO looks at a website, their objectives are completely different to how a developer looks at a website.
Right.
So I've worked with a number of JavaScript sites, worked with some beautiful complete React sites which work fine, they've been built fine, they render fine with Google, rank fine, perfect. The issues come when the scope might not be as complete as it needs to be, or a JavaScript site is done without a scope. So it's important for me with some JavaScript sites that it's rendered server side, so Google can get it easier. Certain elements for me require a plain HTML fallback, like pagination, menu items.
Yes.
Some JavaScript's done where there's a lot of escape fragments used in href links, in headers and things like that. So for me, it's a case of JavaScript can be a wonderful asset if scoped in the right way. Issues arise for me when that communication channel and that scope and specification isn't as thorough, isn't as clear, and isn't as open as it needs to be.
Right.
And that for me is when it starts to fall down. I mean, we all know that at the end of the day, Google makes money. It's a private company.
Yes.
It's not there for the good of all of us.
Yes.
100% definitely not there for the good of all of us.
Yeah.
But crawling the web costs money.
Yes.
We know that JavaScript's a lot more resource heavy than that. So when they cache JavaScript, it makes sense they're going to cache it for a longer time because they're going to crawl it and render it less frequently because it's heavy. You use up resources, that costs money, servers cost money, storage costs money, keeping them cold costs a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah.
So working out how to do that properly, and that is one of the challenges I see with SEO quite a bit, but it's that communication channel with the developers. And okay, my talk today was about negating DevOps and going around developers, but even when you're doing that, you still have to involve them in the conversation.
Yeah.
Because I don't see the JavaScript service worker solution as being a solution for removing from the equation. It's a case of going, hi Mr. Developer, can we do this so I don't have to pest you every 5 minutes?
Right.
They'll say yes, works, fine, move on. If I turn around and say to them, we're going to build this in React, how about, can we just change the specification this way to do this? I'm going to explain to them all, over the long term, it'll mean X, Y, Z, and it means I'll bug you less, or it builds a relationship. And if you can include them in that conversation, I think you can negate a lot of issues with JavaScript from the get-go. But again, it's because if I ask you to build a house, and then ask someone else to build a house, you'll probably build 2 completely different houses.
Right.
If I give you more rigid specifications, they'll come closer together to what the actual needs to be.
Do you think SEOs don't like JavaScript, according to John's tweet?
I think there's a lot of misunderstandings out there around it, because being completely honest, I mean, I have got a very, very basic level knowledge of how to code and how to write HTML, how to write JavaScript. I never in a million years describe myself as a developer, because there's laws in the UK called Trade Description Act which prevent you from doing that.
Interesting.
I'm not a developer, but I've got the basic understanding to do what I do. For me, it's for 2 objectives, it's 2 different things. When you ask a developer to build something, they'll build it so it works. So it meets the aesthetic things, it meets the functionality. Whereas they might not understand exactly the back end and the actual rationales behind certain things, or understand like why you need a plain HTML fallback for pagination, why certain things need to work the way we do. So it's opening up communication channels. And also JavaScript, if you're not familiar with how to actually write JavaScript, it's daunting because it's an unknown, and it's like, I know it's an issue, but I don't know why it's an issue.
Right.
And it's that not knowing which makes it a little bit, I'd probably say people are more tentative to go to it. I wouldn't say they don't like it, it's just more of it's not within their skill set, because that role is merging a lot more, and we're having to pick up more development, and to an extent development's having to pick up a little bit more SEO knowledge and implementations.
This is the part that I panic about. So I worked with a client and they were building a particular landing page in JavaScript on the front end, and I'd do fetch and render. I'd see most of the stuff. The Google's cache didn't show as much. It was crawlable a little bit. There was not really any content in the HTML. When I see all these different, I don't know which one is the right one to look at, or when I'm not seeing everything in the HTML or inspect element, it's overwhelming. I don't know how to approach that situation.
So for me, with JavaScript at the moment, one of the go-to things I look at. and as stupid as it might sound, is the mobile friendly checker, because in there they give you a HTML view, and that is the rendered HTML view that Google sees. So I look at it, so I've worked with a couple of e-commerce clients, and they have reviews on there, and you click on reviews, it opens up a JS thing appears, and I'm like, well, that's great, but I can't see this in the rendered HTML. There's no review scheme. I can't see the review schema, and if I can't see it in this view, and it's what Google's rendered HTML is, they probably can't see it either.
Yeah.
So how about we change this implementation and just work around it this way, just to achieve what we're trying to achieve. But yeah, like you said, the cache will show different things, fetch and render will show different things.
Yeah.
For me though, when you're asking it to do a fetch and render, you're purposefully asking for it to commit resource. Whereas in the cache, I mean, this is again opinion talking, I don't know if it has the same committal of resource.
Right.
Because obviously JavaScript's a lot more resource heavy for it to crawl. Will it just focus when you do fetch and render more in certain areas? So for me, again, it's proofing the pudding. So if it's something basic you can test, I'd continuously test it, do quote marks around it, do the search like that, see if Google's picking up the content. And importantly, I think over time, you can, through analysis, you can kind of establish whether or not it's working based on how well the site's performing.
That's true. And finally with that, there's this idea of like, you've got the static accessibility of content, but then crawling, the long term, the ability to not just process one page, see the content, cache it, but the entire site. How do you see JavaScript affecting that in any way, positively, negatively? Does that cause problems, even if the content's accessible, crawling it, right? Understanding the site as a whole?
For me, as long as the JavaScript for me is executed with server-side rendering, all important links, navigations, I mean, I still, in some cases, the best practice recommendation is not to use JavaScript for top navigation menus. I've seen it work. If I check a site and it does that and it works, that's not an issue. If it isn't working, I would say, well, can we not just do like a plain HTML fallback version with some CSS? Can we do X, Y, Z just to try and help it along? And for me, as long as links and everything else are recoverable and you have fallbacks in place, and you render on the server side and take that load off, Google trying to render it on the client side,
right?
You're kind of heading in the right direction.
Okay, great. And that perspective of the entire page doesn't have to be one or the other. You can pick and choose certain elements. I like that, and that's the first time I've heard somebody sort of describe it in that very detailed way. So that actually helped me personally. I hope that helps some of the listeners as well. I want to do a couple quick hit questions here as we wrap things up in a few moments. First, you wrote a great post on SEO and PPC working together. I'm wondering if you can just highlight one sort of benefit of how PPC can help SEO.
To be honest with me, the key benefit of the whole thing is the data collaboration. Obviously, it's competing for the same spaces on a SERP, and we can see particularly from certain data sets. So with PPC, it can also help us define intent. So I've done quite a bit on intent work over the last couple of years, but essentially, if you're bidding on a keyword with 10,000 search volume, and they're sending it to a landing page which is tailored for that sort of topic and with forms and it's been funneled perfectly, but the conversion rate is really low. But there's another keyword similar, probably a bit more longer tail, a couple of compounds on there which is only 3,000 search volume, but that's converting really high. Then you can probably look and determine, well, that's probably more informational, that's commercial, and then you can also think, well, if that's the PPC data, that's going to be the same people searching who pick up the organics. So with that, we can actually look and go, well, from that intent side, we've got this organic keyword, we're currently on page 2 for it. It's basically, as the old adage goes, on page 2 is the best place to hide a dead body. The search volume's low, it's not getting much reading, but we think this will convert really well. Hey, PPC team, can you add this to that campaign and channel it there? Do that and supplement the SEO in the same way. Hey, we're ranking really high actually, like in position 1, 2 for these 3-4 keywords. Maybe we can reduce the bidding slightly, then organic will pick up some of the slack as well, rather than try and compete with the same cannibalization. Or maybe just bidding times, reduce the windows. So for me, it's how they can learn together. So rather than be 2 separate channels working that silo. And okay, we're 2 completely different skill sets, but there's learnings we can take from each other to benefit each other and ultimately the client. So it's win-win.
Absolutely. You also wrote a little bit about EAT and e-commerce. So EAT, expertise, authority, and trust from Quality Raters Guidelines. You talked a little bit about how to build that up for e-commerce. I'm wondering if you can share a few examples of that.
Yeah, so with EAT, it has obviously done a lot of rounds again since the Medic update especially. And we know it's Google basically using all embeddings, learning more, and at a very basic level of that, it is expertise, authority, and trust. So again, it's actually going back to the granola bar example of Ron's Whiteboard Friday. So essentially, it's that you're an e-commerce site. Okay, you say you're a sweater. Mm-hmm. You've got a picture of a sweater. You've got an add to cart. You've got 3 sentences written about the sweater. You got the title. You got the price. You also want to have the reviews on there.
Yes.
You want to have a size guide. If there's a person wearing a sweater in a photo, how tall are they? What size are they wearing? What's the fit? Is it fit as expect? Is it slimline? Things like that. Right. So then people are looking at that and going, well, that's user value content, and you're showing that. So then automatically you're building up a bit of expertise on the page. The review element of it will help introduce trust.
Yes.
If people are buying it and obviously review, that's a good signal. The authority, that comes from everything as a whole. That comes from your brand, that comes from the signals you create. That's it. So if Ford release an article about an engine, that's highly likely to be an authoritative source.
Yes.
Because they're well established in that field.
Right.
Likewise, it's crazy amount of noise to create that authority to then actually have somewhere to point to and go, actually, we're experts in this. We produce this content here to help users. We understand that when you buy that sweater, you want to know how it hangs, you want to know how it fits. You want to even potentially know how staticky it gets on a night. So it's basically creating user content and user signals and being as upfront as you can. And the mistake I see a lot of people then make is they go, well, here's a picture of a sweater, here's a price, then immediately underneath it, here's the cross-sells to complete the look, here's upsells, here's everything else. When all the other content gets pushed to the bottom.
Right.
Or it's in tabs, or it's in things like that. And for me, and people go, oh, we don't want long scroll, we don't want this. Well, just have it there, because users look for it, users want it, they don't care about the long scroll.
Right.
On mobile, have it there, have it accessible, use non-JavaScript tabs where people can move along things, Google can process it and render it easily.
Because if it's there and they don't scroll, fine, they don't see it.
No, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, we've done heat map testing on e-commerce sites, and it was something like, on this particular site, only 20% of users are actually getting to the bottom of these pages. And it's like, yeah, that's where your size guide is. And that's why people want to buy stuff. I mean, one of the clothes shops I buy from online in the UK, they have all of that. They have I can look at the picture, and it's like, after a while, I almost kind of go, well, that model is pretty much the same height and weight as me.
Yes.
I pretty much know if I look at pictures and see him wearing something, I know instantly how that will kind of reflect on me. I know the size guide, I know that without even having to click into the product.
Right.
So you open up multiple tabs, you open up engagement, and ultimately you spend longer on the site. And for me, if you can keep someone on the site for longer,
yes,
probably got more chance of capturing either a lead or a conversion or something like that.
Absolutely. Last question, I wanted to ask about Yandex Metrica. I saw some slides of a presentation you did where you talked about this, and I don't know much about it. It looked maybe analytics, but what is this exactly? Because it seems like something, I've never heard of it. No one's talked about it that I know of, so what is this exactly?
So Yandex Metrica is essentially, it's Yandex's version of Google Analytics. It's another useful tool to have in a skill set. Mm-hmm. In Europe at the moment, we've got something called GDPR, which came into effect in May. So that's a new data protection law, which has made basically you have to do some trickery with how you actually work with Yandex, because that goes through Russian servers, which all your data now has to be held in EU servers. Yeah. So they've had to adapt for it, but essentially it's legal, it's useful. But out of the box, it also gives you heat mapping software.
Really?
It gives you scroll map software.
Can you use this in the US?
You can use it in the US, and we can use it on any site, even if you're not in Russia.
Yeah, and it's free?
And it's free.
Wow.
And it also gives you session recording as well.
No kidding.
Out of the box.
Sounds like a lot more things than GA does out of the box.
For me, yeah. I mean, in terms of like the number of data points it gives you, it's more. For me, it's a lot quicker to look at things. The data is displayed in a different way, and the added benefits of it as well come out quite nicely. The Yandex Metrica code has been So the JavaScript code upon has been described as heavy previously, but it's not that heavy anymore.
Yeah.
It's pretty useful to use. So
I was going to ask if you saw any negatives of using it, or
no, from a European perspective, it's about making sure it's set up correctly.
Yeah.
Because we've got such stringent data protection laws now, we have to make sure that it's set up correctly, otherwise we're in violation of them.
Yeah.
In the US, I can imagine it's fine if you want to use. I mean, it is Russian software.
Yeah.
Be fine in that respect, but it's free. It's another data point as well, because even like I don't focus on Bing too much. I have Bing Webmaster Tools export everywhere, and I export the API.
Yep.
For me, if you can get as much data as you can for free, get it.
Yes. Yeah, why not? That's what I'm thinking as you're describing this, is anybody out there listening, just set it up and you'll have the data. It sounds really cool. I'm going to go do that. So Dan, it's been great chatting with you. Just take one more moment to tell people where you want them to find you online: Twitter, LinkedIn, the Salt Agency site, etc.
Yeah, so you can find me at salt.agency, which is our URL. You can also find me on Twitter at TaylorDanRW. Or you can just send me a message on LinkedIn, just Dan Taylor on there.
Great. Awesome, Dan. Thanks for taking the time to out of a really busy schedule today to chat. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah.